I think that the steps to achieving enterprise value growth is always to develop company goals. That's a good set, but the company goals have to be after you have the clean set of books. So then you create company goals, you determine the strategy to achieve those goals, and then you build the financial forecast. And the clean set of books is what's important to build that financial forecast.
Welcome to our middle market moment, where we speak with other professionals who help business owners build value, de-risk their companies, and prepare both personally and professionally to do the deal of a lifetime through M&A. Today, I want to welcome Julie Stead. Julie is a fractional CFO at Turning Point Consulting. Julie graduated from the University of Washington in 2004 with a master's degree in public accounting. She achieved her CPA in 2005 and spent the first several years of her career working in public accounting before migrating to industry. She has been part of the Turning Point team since 2011 in the fractional CFO advisory group. Julie's primary focus is on clients who are struggling with cash flow or profitability issues, whether due to revenue growth exceeding capacity or market retraction. She assists clients in helping them understand their financial situation and cash flow constraints, focused on forecasting revenue and the future, and finding solid ground. She works directly with her clients, CEOs, and accounting departments, reviewing processes, procedures, and ensuring accuracy in financial reporting to improve efficiencies. Hi, Julie. Welcome.
Hi, Craig. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. I've been looking forward to this. We should, in full disclosure, let people know that we've worked together before. We have similar age twins. We live in the same hometown, so it's about as friendly a conversation as you can get. So appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited.
Yeah, so maybe we should start kind of at the beginning, right? You take a holistic view of creating business value. And as a trained and experienced CFO and CPA, I want to start there. Can you discuss why it's so important to have clean books and robust accounting? Because in my mind, if you don't get this correct, every other piece of decision making is suspect at worst or uninformed at best. We see it all the time. So why should entrepreneurs pay attention to their financial health?
Well, first of all, in full disclosure, I'm going to start by saying that I was an auditor in my past career. So a clean set of books is step one with all my clients. I think that the steps to achieving enterprise value growth is always to develop company goals. That's a good set, but the company goals have to be after you have the clean set of books. So then you create company goals, you determine the strategy to achieve those goals, and then you build the financial forecast. And the clean set of books is what's important to build that financial forecast. You're using historical information in order to determine what the trends are and then forecast that out into the future. I don't think it's possible to accurately forecast the future unless you have a clean set of books to start. Otherwise, you're looking at amounts and trends that are inaccurate, which will lead to inaccurate forecasting. And most critically, the CEOs will be making information based on inaccurate information. So again, first step to anything is always a clean set of books. Review for any relevant departures from GAAP, clean up your books, and then we can get rolling with the rest of the forecasting and other tasks to generate enterprise value growth.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Let's before we lose CEOs and entrepreneurs, oh boy, we're going to talk about finance and accounting, right? Let's really make it tangible in terms of what goes wrong. Let's say you've got somebody on cash accounting, they should be on accrual, or they're on accrual and they should be on GAAP or percentage complete. I know you and I are working on something together on that. What shows up unexpectedly when some of those things are not accurate or they're relying on tools that they've quite frankly outgrown?
Well, I think that from when you brought up the cash versus accrual basis, cash basis accounting is very challenging to forecast on, in the sense that it's cash coming in, cash going out. it's hard to figure out what your overall margins are when you're doing cash basis accounting. So I think that like anytime we come into um, a company where we're trying to help coach them on building their companies to sell, that step one will always be let's if you're on cash basis accounting, we need to figure out how to convert to full accrual basis accounting in order to truly understand how the company is working and what the true profitability of the company is. It's important in those situations to understand what the profitability is by product line so that you understand which products are truly profitable to the company, because you could have some products mixed in there that aren't actually truly profitable, and you'd want those would be some things that you might want to cut in order to drive your overall enterprise value and increase your marketability.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I want to lean into that a little bit because obviously, we deal with a lot of buyers and sellers, and we do a little bit of that ourselves. Um, and really, the first thing that a buyer is going to do is they're going to want to know the answer to where are you really making your money, right? Where is the value being created? And that could be an examination of gross margin by product, EBITDA by line of business, contribution by product line. You know, clients are often amazed when someone does a deep dive on their financials and say, gee, you're making a whole lot of profit here, but you're losing it over there. And a lot of entrepreneurs look at all revenue is good, right? So maybe give us an example of how you kind of open their eyes to how the tools can be used to give them better information for decision making.
Yeah, so I think one example, well, I have quite a few examples here. I would say one client in particular had been that we had been working with. We came in and first cleaned up the books and then started building out the financial forecast. But in order to build out the financial forecast, we really dissected the information in order to pull out the different divisions and different lines of business. And then after we did that, we also were able to show them, hey, you have a 20% EBITDA margin on this one line of business, and this other line of business we're at a negative 10. What's going on here? And then after we were able to determine that by separating the information, management had never looked at the information separately. Once we determined that we had that product line that was so negative, we then determined, okay, what do we need to do to make it profitable? Can we make it profitable, or is this something that we need to a line of business we need to ditch? In the end, it was just determined that there were basically too many crews, not enough work to keep the crews busy, and we were losing a lot of money. And we did scale it back. That was when we really decided to take apart what the company was doing, change the strategy, scale things back to a point where it was profitable, and then work on growing the company through strategic direction.
Yeah, and I think what you just described, and I'm a believer in having a CFO on board. Um, you just described something that's way more strategic than finance accounting, right? It's about looking at the business, looking for opportunities of growth, looking for profit. That is a strategic conversation just as much as it is a finance and accounting conversation. And where we see people get into trouble is they wake up one day without access to that information and say, wow, I've just gone backwards 2 months on my P&L because I wasn't aware of some of these things and wasn't able to look at the trends that are coming down the track. And I know you spend a lot of time looking at trends and predicting the future for your clients. Maybe share with us a little bit of the building blocks. I think you started it with in terms of pro forma, but you get the accounting right, then what?
Okay, so accounting right, that is always step one.
Mm-hmm.
Step two is you work as a, well, this should come from the office of the CEO, but you build out company objectives for how you're going to grow or where you want to go with the company. From there, you pull in the strategy and then you build out a plan using the forecast. From there, this is where things get really fun. That's where we start bringing in our predictive analytics. So for a lot of our companies, we're pulling in dashboarding at that point. We use Power BI, and we use Power BI in order to provide our CEOs and our CFOs and our teams within the organizations with real-time information and predictive information in order to make more proactive decisions. I think one of the biggest issues CEOs run into today is that they're often not provided with financial information until the 15th day after close. And
Mhm.
if you think about it, 15 days after close, some of those transactions started 45 days ago. So
Yeah.
if you're just then finding out that something blew up, then it's really any decision you make at that point will be more reactive in nature, and it'll put you further behind the curve. So we coach our team, our especially our companies that are saying, I have this 5-year plan. I want to double my revenue, double my enterprise value so that I can sell for this amount. Okay, well, this is what you need to do. This is the tool we need in order to get you there.
Yeah, that's brilliant, right? Accounting has often been maligned as being the rear view mirror, right, to business people. And ultimately, if you don't get that right because of the time lag, right, you can't predict accurately and you can't see things coming until it's too late, just like you outlined. We see that all the time. And I know in your practice, you often help people because the pain that they're experiencing may not just be how it shows up in the P&L, but it's really all about cash, right? And they start to feel the pressure of cash, but you're 45 days, you're 60 days in, a lot of times, depending upon how lean they're running, that can almost be too late in some instances. How have you kind of turned that around for folks in your
Oh,
practice?
yeah. So with a lot of our distressed companies, or not even necessarily distressed, but companies that are struggling, this happened
Mhm,
quite a bit post COVID during the inflationary period, where
mhm,
again, companies didn't have access to real time information. They weren't seeing that their margins were getting eroded by inflation. Their
mhm,
profitability was suffering because of it. They didn't pivot strategically fast enough. It impacted their cash flow. So now, for many of our companies that we came into, are we engaged with post COVID to help navigate their cash flow issues, we have 13-week cash plans that we build. We manage the cash flow for them on pretty much, I mean, I have some companies I'm managing it on a daily basis, just trying to get them to catch back up. And
mhm.
so it's all about teaching them. A lot of these companies, I've been working on coaching them on how profitability and or lack thereof has impacted their cash flow, and how, hey, we need to make sure that we're staying ahead of this, because if not, then this is how it impacts cash flow um, for the company. So
Yeah, I'm reminded of the old adage, right? Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king and queen, right? I mean, it's like at the end of the day, that's where the pain comes, right? You need blood coursing through your body, right? The cash is the blood. So no, that's brilliant, Julie. Appreciate that. So tell me a little bit. So I'm going to go just drill down a little bit because I think the other mistake sometimes that entrepreneurs do, and this is why the fractional CFO model is so valuable to them, because they can rent all of your experience based on what they need, not necessarily hire someone full time. So you get somebody with a lot more chops, right? That has been been to the big show supposedly, right? And is able to share some of that wisdom. What is the break point for you as you're meeting with companies and as they kind of climb up in maturity to where you say, you know what, bookkeeper was great, even controller might be great, but a strategic CFO is what you need. How do you guys kind of walk through that with clients?
well, I think that we as a firm might be a little bit different, because I feel like we have strategic CFOs that can kind of manage um, different ages of a company. We have people that can help build out. So when a company comes to us and they say, I have a 5-year plan to sell, we have people that can help walk them through that process, through that 3 to 5 year process to grow the company. But then we also have deal CFOs. So we have people that then can step in and work through the M&A process. I think lower to mid market companies, if you have a solid controller in place, having a strategic CFO, fractional CFO is really the way to go. I'm not necessarily sure you would need a full-time CFO, but that depends heavily on the overall complexity of your industry, the complexity of your business, how many divisions there are, there's a lot of different aspects that go into that decision. But I think for us, for our firm, because we have so many people that have different skill sets, we really do have strategic CFOs that can step in any step of the process. Whether it's distressed, we've got people that can work through the distress process to the point where the company says, okay, we're out of being distressed. Now, 3 to 5 years out, we want to sell, help us grow. And then once we get to the selling point, we have our deal CFOs that could then step in at that point.
Yeah, that's terrific. It's a lot of times companies will try to, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And, you guys have specialized kind of services, if you will, to make sure that you're responsive to what the client really needs. Maybe lean into that a little bit as we think about the M&A environment, as we, many baby boomers are now, done with the pandemic. They've lived through recessions and all of that, and they're thinking about exiting. Maybe give us a glimpse into what that looks like when you transition into a deal CFO at Turning Point.
Hmm.
Like keeping diligence on track and making sure that the
Okay.
company is focused on the actual transaction.
So we've worked at Turning Point. We have consultants that work specifically on the deal side of things. So we have people that have worked through the due diligence process. They manage the data room. They look at the schedules. They're answering questions. They're kind of managing that whole process. And then we also have, we also have schedules that we've had to prepare in the past for deals where it's forecasts that are testing out different debt scenarios. We have schedules that we've had to prepare where it is like one specific case that I can remember. It was one company that was selling, but they had companies in our divisions in 3 different countries on 3 different sets of books in 3 different currencies. And so we had to build the schedules to consolidate in order to show to the buyer that this was the revenue. We also had to convert in that situation. We also had to convert revenue to accrual basis because they weren't reporting it in accordance with GAAP. So we have very strategic deal CFOs that will step in and kind of manage that process. But I can also say that there are some that are not just specific deal CFOs. Like I could manage that process, and I don't necessarily think I would classify myself as a deal CFO. But I have stepped in those situations and still been able to manage the process. I think it depends heavily on how complex the deal is. Many of our deals are, they're kind of especially lower to mid market, they're not super complex deals. And so I absolutely love stepping in and helping through the sell process. It's kind of a relief when you're helping somebody exit a company. It's kind of like an exciting, it's an exciting transactions as opposed to some of, the other side of what I do can be pretty stressful when you have companies that are struggling to make payroll. So
yeah. Well, and I think it certainly helps when you can see both sides of that coin, right? The one experience informs the other for sure. Well, you brought up a good point about complexity, and a mentor of mine once said, business is simple, we just complicate it. And so, a lot of would-be sellers prioritize tax savings because owning a private company is one of the benefits of that is you are able to sometimes save some taxes in different areas. But many entrepreneurs kind of ring that bell too many times and run all sorts of stuff through the books. And when they get to a sale, they get hurt by that in terms of buyer trust and confidence, as well as the complexity. So how do you advise clients? Let's say you've got a client that's a year or two away from selling, obviously there's GAAP considerations, but how do you really get entrepreneurs to understand, yeah, you're going to pay a little bit of tax in the year that you sell, but having clean books may be the difference between getting a deal done and not getting a deal done?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would never, if I knew a company was running things through the books that they shouldn't, then I would absolutely, that would be like a big red flag. And I'd tell them, if it's 5 years before the sale, I would say something about it.
Mhm.
I do think that owners should take advantage. Like if something is tax deductible, they should take advantage of that.
Sure.
I think that if they are transactions that they're running through the company that does not enhance the overall profitability, meaning it doesn't contribute to the overall foundation of the company and the overall profitability, then keep track of it. Make sure that you know what those are so that you can disclose those during the sale process. So, but I think that there's a balance there between what's tax deductible and what the tax rules are versus what the benefit is on the sell side of it. So,
Yeah, yeah. And we've had to have those tough conversations with some sellers that are particularly aggressive in that area, shall we say. And it does become sobering, and we try to get them to understand the buyer's perspective. If you're flirting with the tax law and trying to bend it so it doesn't break, a buyer's going to pick up on that. And if you're trying to run every last item through the company, they're going to say, well, what happens post close? Does that behavior change? Or,
yeah,
and the worst is if you're trying to defraud the government, you're surely going to defraud your buyers. So you really have to do that risk analysis, especially around a sale. And
yeah, I would,
especially as a buyer is going to want to professionalize the business anyway, it's less
yeah.
of a lifestyle business post close.
Yeah, I don't think I would never, if one of my companies that they were potentially getting ready to sell if I noticed they were being really aggressive with
Mhm.
their interpretation of the IRS laws, then that would be my first thing. One of the first things, besides cleaning up the books, that would be one of the first
Yeah.
things I'd consult them on. Hey, you need to dial that back. So,
Yeah, I remember, and I learned this the hard way on one of my companies. I went through an audit process, and I ran two cars through the business at the time. It was just me; it was my business. I didn't have any outside investors at the time, and I went through an audit, and everything was great except they asked me, "Now, who's driving that second vehicle? Is that a company
uh,
car?" And I'm like, "Well, that's my wife's car." Well, does she work in the business? Well, no. Right. So, I mean, that was a ding on the audit, right? And it cost me $9,000. But at the end of the day, especially if you're, headed towards a sale, it really makes sense to have things as clean and tidy
yeah,
as you can.
yeah,
So,
agreed.
speaking of the process, and I know you guys do obviously, ongoing work with companies to help them get prepared and to build value along the way. But when they are thinking about or preparing for sale, it's not a 1 week get ready process, right? So
Nope.
how do you guys look at that, and what's the ideal timing for you to get engaged with a company that's saying, I might want to sell in X amount of years? What does that typically look like for you?
Well, I think it depends on how close they are to selling and what their end goal is, uh,
Mhm.
because we could really help drive enterprise value growth.
Mm,
So earlier the better. I would say I have one client that engaged with us 2 years ago, and with the 5 year plan. And we have our 5 year plan, we have our strategic goals to meet those 5 year plans, and then we have the financial reporting process in place from a not only historical point of view, but also the budgeting and then the dashboarding and everything we need. We have all these tools in place, and the goal is to triple the company's value over this 5 year period to maximize her payout in the end. So I think that it just depends. It depends on how close you are to getting what you want. If the more you want, the earlier you start the process.
you need to trademark that, because that is the absolute golden rule, right? The more you want, the earlier you have to start the process. And as someone who also buys companies, when I hear a company with a 5 year plan, because private equity in general holds assets for 3 to 7 years, and their goals are often to, double the company or triple the company. When I hear that plan's in place, it gives me confidence
Yeah,
that as soon as we hand a bunch of cash and liquidity to the owner, if they've got that discipline and they've got that planning and that capability to put a 5 year plan and stick to it in place, man, that's a desirable company in and of itself with
yep.
forethought. Yeah,
That's
no,
that's
that's
my kind of
valuable.
rule. That's my golden rule. So
When you talk about enterprise value, we talked a little bit about growth. Um, and obviously doing the table stakes thing around finance and accounting. What other areas do you typically help a CEO think through in terms of enterprise value, in terms of, maybe labor or, other tools that you use to help them kind
Mm.
of see the big picture and keep moving towards the big picture while using the financials as a barometer or a guide or a litmus test on how to get there?
So the plan, I have a tool that I use where it's really, you have your company objectives that's set by the office of the CEO. You have specific measurable strategies in order to achieve those goals. And then you have your leadership team, which is essentially those that are the foundation for your growth. They are the key members of management. Each of them create specific measurable quarterly goals in order to help the CEO or the company achieve their annual company goals. So, and all of that ties into the financial reports, and all of that ties into the dashboarding that we create, so that everything is measurable and everything, they are being held accountable for their goals through the dashboard reports that we create. And so I think that it's key that when you are trying to drive enterprise value growth, you're including everybody in management that makes key strategic decisions in that process, so that they can help drive enterprise value growth.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. Getting everyone pulling on the same rope, as it were, and seeing the same information requires some transparency and some coaching,
Yep.
right? Um, that kind of reminds me, as you work with companies and as you kind of develop those tools. You mentioned the word accountability. I mean, we're talking, big boy and big girl stuff here, right? This isn't just lifestyle business, right? Hey, I'm going to do this week and I'm going to do that the next. A lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, we're shiny object people. We like this, we like that, we head towards that. Having that discipline as a team, as a CFO and a strategic CFO, kind of what's your role in keeping people accountable and kind of driving the business? Because a lot of times CEOs are more client facing, market facing, revenue thinking, right? Unless you've got an engineer in charge that likes to tinker in the operations or what have you. How do you handle that as a CFO, and especially as a fractional CFO, because you're not there every day, but you are the right hand person, right, of the CEO? How do you manage that?
We, as typically as CFO for these companies, it's a strategic CFO role. So I'm the one driving those meetings. I'm the one sitting there saying, these were your goals. Where did you come in? How is it? And all this is yes or no. There's no in between. So did you meet the goal or did you not meet the goal? If you didn't meet the goal, why didn't you meet the goal? And how are we going to do better? And so those are conversations that we're having as a group. And I think that really drives accountability, because nobody wants to get in front of a group and say, I didn't meet my goal. So that's kind of how I sit kind of next to the CEO during these meetings. And I'm the one that's driving those conversations to help kind of talk through accountability and where we're at. And then I also, the other tool I use here are the dashboards. So the dashboards, you can do goal tracking to plan, and you can take every single person's quarterly goals that they created and create some type of, because all those goals are measurable. You create the dashboard in order to track those in real time.
Yeah, it's amazing when a team gets galvanized around the numbers.
Yeah.
And we talk about the numbers, and CFOs and finance guys like me get the bad end of it when it comes to the numbers. But if you almost think about almost everything, and I know I'm stepping on the third rail of politics here, almost everything comes down to a number.
Yep.
I mean, how much free time do you want as a CEO? Or, how much time do you spend with your kids? Well, is it 5 minutes or is it an hour, right? It's measurable. Everything that's important is measurable. How many weeks do we have in a standard lifetime, right? It all comes down to the numbers. So,
Yep.
And that accountability is so key. It almost makes the complex simple when you're managing to the numbers by the numbers.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. But there's also fun things. So I want to end this conversation on something that I know is a passion of yours and really shows your grit and determination as an individual. Tell us a little bit about your long distance running prowess and the joy you take from that.
Oh goodness. So this started 11 years ago when my daughter was born. I started just with little goals, and I think it was just a way to get outside and to, I don't know, probably really get back into shape after having a baby. That's what it started at. But it was my first goal was running a half marathon every month, and this was during 2014, which then turned into, because that, after running that many, it just kind of, then I wanted to challenge myself more. So then it turned into running a marathon. And I remember what really inspired me to go beyond the marathon was for the Seattle, I ran the Seattle Marathon in 2014. That was my first marathon. And my brother ran it with me. And my brother was training for a 100-miler at the time. So he ran from his house 7 miles to the start line, ran the marathon with me, and then ran home. And I thought that back then I was like, he is crazy. There's no way I could ever do
Mm-hmm.
that. Then he encouraged me. I ran my first trail marathon a few months later, and then he was just like, that a 50K is an ultra marathon, and that's only 5 miles more. So then I got hooked on 50Ks, and then it just kind of progressed from there, where I was like, okay, I got to keep challenging myself. I got to keep doing more. And so I have a lot of fun with it. My husband runs ultra marathons as well. Um, Admittedly, I haven't run one now in over a year. I got injured last year, and so I've been slowly digging myself out from
Mm-hmm.
underneath that. So hoping to get back into it last year, but it's just something that helps, challenge me physically and keep me healthy. And so it's just something I absolutely love.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's amazing what the body and mind can do when you set it to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I remember my first marathon, I just barely survived it.
Yeah,
And then the
that was,
last one, my wife and I went dancing for hours afterwards, right?
yeah,
It's like, oh, that wasn't so bad, right?
yeah,
It's all what you set your mind to and train your body for. So that's
yeah.
awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Well, I really want to give people an opportunity to contact you and Turning Point. So maybe share a little bit of how they can find you and contact you.
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, so you can search Julie Stead, Stead on LinkedIn, and you'll find me. And then there's also my email address, which is julies@turning-point.com. That's how you'd get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Julie. And thanks for everyone out there. Good luck on your journey to the deal of a lifetime.